Hi everyone. As promised, I'm making a video to share my workflow on how I got my sci-fi character from Term 2 of modeling into Unreal as a playable character. We're going to go over quite a bit of stuff. It's going to get a little deep at times, but I'm going to try and keep it as user-friendly as possible. If you're new to Unreal Engine, this will be a great video for you, a little bit of an introduction. If you are new to rigging and setting up a character to be animated, we're going to go over that in Maya 2, and I'm going to show you where to plug this in inside of a third-person project template in order to get this result you're seeing right in front of you. So I'm going to jump right in. The first thing we're going to do is go download Unreal Engine. Go to the website, get the launcher, and when you pull it up, make sure you're on the Unreal Engine tab. Go over to the library and install the engine version that you want. I'm using 5.3, so we're going to launch that. Actually, I already got it here. And it'll open you up to this. These are my recent projects, but we're going to go to Games and select the third person template. Don't change the settings or anything. We want Blueprint. Just give it a good name. Once you create the project and it loads up, you'll be presented with this, a third person template. And right from the beginning, we can hit play, and we have a playable character that we can use WSAD, mouse to jump, and space to jump, and move the mouse to move the camera. So, if you're new to Unreal Engine, one of the ways to move around, if there's a few ways, hold down left click and start dragging it around, you'll start moving. Hold down right click to turn the camera. The way that I like to move around is to hold down the right click and use the WSAD keys. It's a little more like a video game like that, and that's intuitive for me. If you're coming from Maya or used to Maya, the movement controls from Maya work in Unreal Engine too. You can hold down the Alt key, left click, move around, right click, zooms, middle mouse click to pan. You can even select an object and hit the F key to focus on it, just like in Maya, so that's super handy. So we're inside of here, and we want to swap out that character with our own. So let's look at the project a little bit and see where we need to plug this in, and then we'll go rig our character so that we can. Right here, this little doodad, it's called an actor. Things placed into the scene are called actors, and this is a player start. Now, we have our little capsule here, and our player character spawns inside of that capsule. See? We can even move it around, and that's where they'll spawn. So, we need to change things around so that it spawns our character instead of the mannequin. We're going to open the content drawer, and we're going to dock it, because we're going to be in here quite a bit. Everything, all this content, and engine content and everything, is generated from the template that we selected. So we're going to adjust some things in here to get what we want. Select the third person file and go to the blueprints. Inside of the blueprints, we have two of them. One is the rules for the controls and the game, spawning, everything like that. The other one is just focused on the character. Blueprints are the coding logic for the whole thing. It's node-based visual scripting. You're going to see these nodes everywhere. You've probably already seen them in Maya inside the material editor. Unreal Engine's material editor is very much the same. You want to start designing a game, you're going to use blueprints to set all of your values and everything. It's very handy for artists. I'm not a programmer. A lot of this is Greek to me, and that's okay, because we don't need to do everything, change everything in here to get what we want. And I know, especially if you're new, this can be really overwhelming. Like, look at all this stuff. Well, we only need to concentrate on a little bit. We're going to click on the viewport to see what's going on. And you recognize that capsule? That's from our player start. And we can see on the right in our details panel that our mesh is this SKM Manny, this mesh asset. That is the mesh being displayed here, and it is using our animation class. It's animation blueprint Manny C for controls, I think. And if we want to change characters, it's as simple as opening this and selecting a different character. There's some that are already in here, like Quinn. And we can even change the animation style. We have a Manny set up as well. And then we can do Quinn. You can see how they change stances. Once we hit compile on the top left, it saves these changes. And we can actually see that another character will spawn in using whatever we've selected. I'm using escape to back out of that. Going back into here, we know what we need to change, but how do we get our character in there? And what does our character need in order to be compatible with some of these animation controls that are already set up? I'm going to open up Quinn here to sort of show you what we're going to attempt to do with our character. You can see in here that there are all of these blue lines, and these are the joints and bones that make up the skeleton of a skeletal mesh. A skeletal mesh is just a mesh that's been assigned to skeleton already. And we can see there's a lot going on here, but if we grab like the shoulder joint here and move it, I don't have the right one selected, and move it around, oh, don't make a liar of me. Oh, forget that. I'll show you in a second. We're going to jump into Maya and start doing that with our character. So here I have a character that's already been set up with the skeleton, and the skeleton has been assigned to the mesh. Now I can move it around. So we're going to do that with our character too. But how do we get this skeleton? Well, we can make it ourselves, and I'm going to take a moment to talk about what creating a skeleton does and how it affects meshes once it's assigned. And then I'm going to show you a cheat code to make it super easy. So here's just a basic cylinder with a little bit of density to it, and we're going to assign a skeleton to this mesh. We're going to make it from scratch. So I'm going to hop into the left viewport, or the side view. And before I go any further, let me say that I am in the rigging workspace and the rigging toolbar setup. There's some things up here we need to use, and there's some tools here that we need to use. So if yours doesn't look like this, change those things so that you can see what I'm seeing. Now, we're going to create a skeleton for the mesh. Right here is the Create Joints button, and this tool will let us do that. I'm going to click once, and again, and a third time. Now I am creating joints, but you can't see them because they're inside of the mesh. So what we want to do is click this button here, X-ray joints, and now we can see through our mesh a little bit. My mic died right in the middle of that. How convenient. Okay, so now that we have our skeleton set up inside of our mesh, we should be able to assign it. To do that, we're going to select our mesh, and holding Control, select our skeleton as well. Then we're going to assign the skeleton to the mesh through a process called skinning. So skin, bind skin. I'm going to click here to open the settings box. Take the time to look at it and set your settings to the same thing when you go to do this. Going to hit apply, and now we should be able to bend our mesh. Pretty cool. We'll notice that as we move the first joint, the entire mesh moves. And that's because that first bone is really the root of it all, moving it at the base. As we go up the hierarchy, we can see it bends more. And we should get a bit of a twist at the top too. Now we can influence what's bending and pulling on which joint and bone through adjusting the influence of it. That's with a tool called paint skin weights, or weight painting. We're going to select our mesh and then select that tool, paint skin weights, and we can see that we have this heat map now. I think by default it actually, yeah, it's black and white, and that's showing us on a value of 0 to 1 how much each joint is influencing the mesh around it. I like to use this color ramp here to help get a better visualization of how it's working. Now, I've double-clicked this tool to open these settings, and I use this settings box to select the different joints. Let's rotate a joint, see it bend, and look at that heat map. So, select the mesh, and open up my painting tool to get that map back up. We can see it's bending a little bit. Kind of looks like the bending of a knee almost. So let's say we want to change how that bends. We'll use this tool by painting and using this value here to add influence to the mesh. I'm holding B and left click and dragging to adjust my brush size. As I paint on this, you can see it's jumping all the way up to 1 and giving it a lot harder influence over the mesh. So as I move it, those parts that have the most value move with indifference to the other influences around it. We can smooth that out by holding Shift. See, it changes to SM. That's using our smooth tool, which we could manually select here. But I'm going to stay on Add and use my hotkeys. We can smooth that out. And start to find a better relationship with its influences around. We can go to different joints and change the influence there. We can make our final joint move everything if we wanted to. So, a couple of hotkeys to help us navigate through this tool. Once this is open and we have a paint operation selected, for instance, I have add selected, there's an A, and it will add the value associated with it. I can hold down Shift and I get my smooth tool. I can hold down Control and it inverts my value so that I get the opposite of what I've had before. So if I have it at 100 and it paints white, I should be able to hold Control and sort of paint around that. Painting can be tricky. There's a lot of push and pull, and we'll notice that, we'll notice that it didn't really delete that influence like I was trying to, right? I like to use replace, and then I'll select a different value, and I'll come in and paint that value on. So this color ramp is 0 to 1, the same 0 to 1 here. So halfway through should give us about a yellow color. Now we're about halfway, meeting in the middle, if you will. And we can do a combination of that, smoothing, adding, replacing the values with something we want. So I'm selected on this top joint. I don't want it to influence the mesh all the way down here. So I have a 0 value selected with the replace tool, and now I've changed it back up. So we're going to do this to our character. And as you can already tell, this is where it gets really hairy. This is where the most mistakes can be made. This is where the tediousness comes in, but this is where the tediousness pays off the most. I'm going to go ahead and load up my character that's finished and show you a little bit of how I've already done it. With the mesh selected, I'll go ahead and select my paint tool again. I'm going to select the entire mesh. And we can see the different influences as I've gone through. Now that's a lot, and painting can be really tedious as I've already showed you. But man, look at that skeleton. Go away, paint tool. There's a lot going on here. If I open up this hierarchy, you can see everything that's going on. Pelvis through the spine, connecting to the clavicle, the arm, the hand bones, all of the joints inside of the hand, all of that. That can be really complicated, and if you don't set it up correctly through the hierarchy and the naming structure, it's not going to come out right in Unreal. So I'm going to show you a huge trick to save you a lot of time. We're going to steal a skeleton from Unreal Engine and use it on our character. So let's go back to our project. Minimize this. And we're going to steal a skeleton, like I said. What we're going to do, open up our characters, mannequins, meshes, and this SK mannequin. We're going to use this guy. I'm going to open it up to show you. And we're going to use this bone structure. It looks just like the one I have in my scene, right? We're going to drag and drop it out of the content browser into the world. And then, very importantly, we're going to come over to the right under our details and zero out its location. Should be somewhere over here. Where are you hiding? There you are. And just like in Maya, I'll use F to center. Now that it's zeroed out in the world, we're going to export this whole thing out. By selecting it inside of our world here, we'll go to File, Export Selected, select an appropriate file location, and for our export options, default export options. Boom. Now we're going to go back into Maya. I'm going to make a new scene. And I'm going to drag and drop the skeleton I just exported. I like to drag and drop my assets right into the viewport of programs. That works for most of them and just kind of saves you a few button presses. So boom, here's our mannequin. We're going to hit our X-ray button to see that bone structure. And there it is. We don't need this mesh. So I'll delete it. Goodbye. Now let's bring in our character. All right. Again, dragging and dropping. And there they are. So we can see our skeleton doesn't quite line up right now, but it's important that it does. What we're going to do, select the joints and rotate them into place. Try to keep in mind you don't want to go willy-nilly with the rotation because you will be bending that elbow backwards and such. So as you adjust this, try to keep it as clean as you can. Make sure you're changing your viewport around so that you get it into the center of the mesh. as close as you can, and take the time to line everything up. So here I'll select my wrist and rotate it through. You'll notice that I'm rotating a lot of these joints instead of moving them. You can move them, but it's better practice to rotate it from the preceding joint. So for instance, the shoulder moves the whole arm, then the elbow will move the wrist, that sort of thing. If you get into the engine and it's twisted around, it might be because the joint is twisted in this process here. So take the time to go through and line that up and center that out. Just like on the hips here. Maybe we want to move it in a little bit like that. Rotate it. Get our stance. Do your best to make these as even as possible. There is a way to do half of the skeleton and then mirror it to the other side, but if you're new and you don't really know what you're doing, it could screw you up. So what we're going to do is go through our skeleton and move it around and get it aligned as best we can. I've done that in another file. I showed you earlier, I believe. And this is what we're going for. You can see my hand. It's pretty centered. You can see where I've placed my hip joints, knee, ankles, and such. Once you get to this, we're going to assign the skeleton. And I'll just go ahead and take a minute to vaguely get close here. That'll be good enough for this purpose. So, we're going to assign the mesh to the skeleton, just like we did with the cylinder earlier. Select our bones, hold control, and select your mesh. Go to Skin, Bind Skin, and again, these are the settings that I used. After you apply it, we should immediately be able to see that it's connected to our skeleton. And it won't be perfect, not at first. It's pushing and pulling in odd places, right? That's where that weight paint tool is going to come in. I'll do a little bit now and show you a few tricks that I've used to sort out my mesh. Now this is a push and pull process, a give and a take. We'll take it into Unreal Engine and we'll see that it may not be perfect, and we can come back into Maya, make little adjustments, and re-import that asset to the Unreal Engine until we get it perfect. And this part is the most time-consuming process, but it's worth it. When you get it right, it looks right. Everything else is sort of you just need to learn the workflow, but this is where the little touches come in and the little adjustments and the eye for it. So one of the ways that I like to get things sorted out is I'll bend my arm up, and then where it looks weird, I'll paint over that. So what I need to do is select my mesh, go to my weight painting tool, oh my. Maya likes to pick fights, doesn't she? There we go. And then I can go through and find the bone in this hierarchical structure, but the quick tip is to find the joint you want to adjust and right click on it and select influence. Ooh, pardon me. Then you can go through and paint on that. So I have a huge brush. Holding B, left click and drag. I can see where it's pulling in this awkward position, and I'll move it up again. So what I want to do is reduce how much that arm is pulling on that waist, the chest area. So I said I like that replace. I'm going to replace it with a 0 value. And it'll start to paint into place. And you want to go through and push and pull and sort of sculpt on this until you get that desired effect. Now, even though I'm reducing the weight here, it's still pulling up awkwardly, and that might be because some of the other arms have influence on it, or some of the other joint bones and such. This is something where you're going to have to experiment. Your mesh may come out a little bit differently than mine as far as influences on the weights start. So just go through, take your time, push and pull, smooth it out, and distort that skeleton so that you can see what needs to be done. So this clavicle sure has a lot of pull. So this is the tedious part. Take your time. I know I've said that over and over again, but it's worth it. After you've moved your skeleton around, you can reset that pose by selecting the skeleton, going to skin, and selecting go to bind pose. The bind pose is the pose it was in when you bound the skin to the mesh. So you can push and pull on these arms and legs. Select influence. Select influence. Okay, fight me then. Oh, that's why. You can push and pull on these arms and legs, be like, whoa, that's not coming out right. Once you notice that, you can select this influence. Now my heat map didn't show up. Why? Because I'm selected the bones instead of the mesh. So I'm going to go back to the mesh. There we go. Now I can see what I'm doing. And we can see that this bone doesn't have a lot of influence on that part of the shoe down there. That's why it's getting left behind. So we'll replace it with a higher value and start to paint on. It's jumping into place now. And we can continue to paint on that until it's in place. Quick tip. Inside of your painting tool, as you can see the paintbrush is on the icon, we can middle mouse click, and that opens up our gizmo to rotate it. And using the middle mouse click again, we can make adjustments and move it around. Then simply left clicking pops us right back to where we were. So what I'll do is select this influence, middle mouse click, bring it down some so the mesh isn't so distorted, and that might make it a little easier to paint on. Left clicking to go back and getting my influence painted back in there. So you can see the sort of progress that's already coming along. And I'll now, not going to make this perfect, but I wanted to show you kind of how it comes together. So now, my selected bone, I think I painted influence on the knee instead of the foot. But hey, you know, these mistakes are part of the learning process, right? It worked out in this case. Now my ankle doesn't rotate my foot. So, painting, selecting the right influence, and let's give it some influence there. Boom. Now my ankle has more control over the foot, and it's not my hip driving that force. And I can go back to that knee and replace it with no value. That way they're not fighting each other. And we can actually already see that the influence from the knee has been reduced by going back onto the foot and giving that ankle joint more influence. So you can go back and forth down the hierarchy of your bones, adjusting your paint weights to get it just right. Once you get it right, and it's looking good, and it's moving the way it should, we need to export it. We're going to select our bones and our skeleton, go to File, and export the selection. Make sure it's an FBX. Otherwise, the settings are default. I'll go ahead and scroll through them just to make sure that yours match up when you do it. Export that and save it where appropriate. And let's jump back into the Unreal Engine. There's our mannequin right where we left it. And now we're going to change our character. Well, first we got to get it in here, huh? Let's go to Characters and make a new folder. For our sci-fi guy, no plus sign. I'm going to drag and drop the skeletal mesh that I just exported from Maya. These are the default settings. It is a skeletal mesh now, so we'll make sure that's checked. We'll import the mesh, all this other stuff. It's default, so you don't have to worry about it. We'll assign a skeleton to it later. There we go. Don't worry about this. My materials have come through too. These are super basic, just a base color. We can talk more about materials another time. I'm going to clean this up real quick. Oh my. Just moving those materials out of the way. And we've got these three assets here, the physical asset, the skeleton, and the skeletal mesh, which is a combination of these. So we're going to right click on our skeletal mesh, go to skeleton, and assign skeleton. Inside of here, we're going to select the SK mannequin, the one that we exported before. And if we've done everything right, our currently selected skeleton, our sci-fi character, should match up to our target skeleton, the SK mannequin. And we want to scroll down here and make sure that it does. Seeing an error here will let you know that something in the Maya process of skinning and rigging that character got a little messy. For instance, see how it says missing here? Because this skeleton can't find the matching bone. So when you assign a skeleton to a character that has a skeleton, they need to match up. That's super important. And it was the biggest hurdle for me trying to get this done. So, SK mannequin, it's looking good. We'll hit accept. Oh, let's make sure we save too. Saving up here saves this world and this level, but saving down here saves the assets and the things that we've brought in and the changes we've made to our blueprints. Okay, now that that's done and we saved, we're going to go back to that third person blueprint and open that up again. Select the viewport to see, and there's our sci-fi guy. Already popped in using an animation class, and if we're in here and it looks decent and it doesn't look like an alien and it doesn't look like they have broken bones, then congratulations, you've pretty much done it. At this point, we can hit compile and hit play, and our character is inside the world, running and jumping, which was the whole goal. And the first time you try this, it may look real funky. Mine looked real funky for a long time. So you need to go through and make adjustments after that. So I'm going to show you real quick before I go how you can go through and sort of change these things and critique them. Go back and forth and make adjustments. So we're going to go to our character, our sci-fi guy. Leave this open. And let's go back to Maya. If we go through here and we need to make adjustments, let's say we paint on our mesh. And I'm going to paint something crazy so we can see the difference here. Yeah, we should be able to see that difference. So this shoulder has a bunch of influence over the rest of the body now. Should be fun. What you'll do is you'll go through and export the file again. You can export it into a new FBX if you want to keep them separate, or you can overwrite your old one. I'm going to export and save this here in a second. Bear with me as I navigate my own messy file structures. Cool. Now I'm going to go back into the engine. And once we're inside of our character and we've exported another asset with changes that we want to use from Maya, we simply right-click on the skeletal mesh and hit re-import. If you've saved over your old file that you imported in the first time, you can hit re-import. If you've saved it to a new FBX file to keep them separate, you want to hit re-import with a new file. I'm going to select the export that I just messed up in Maya to update this skeleton. And it's probably going to look pretty funky when we get going here. Oh yeah. A little glitchy for sure. And this may be what your guy looks like when you first jump in here. So if we want to fix that, you know? Yeah. Go into Maya. I'm just going to Control Z and act like I fixed it. Save that all out again. Come into the engine. Right click. Re-import that file again. You don't have to delete everything and then re-import everything. You can just update the skeleton. We can go through and see our changes pretty quickly without restarting our workflow completely. Additionally, we can see the influences inside of this window too. I've already fixed it, but that little weird mess up I did as an example would have reflected here too. And something I still need to work on is my hand. This twisted up, right? So what I'll do is the same workflow and go through and adjust the weights on my hand and then re-import it, open this window up again, and immediately see the changes. And I'll do that over and over again until it starts really looking good. I hope this helps you. I know it's kind of a lengthy video and kind of a deep topic. All kinds of disciplines being utilized here, and we really just broke into the surface of a lot of them. If you have any questions, hit me up in Slack anytime, send me a DM, and you are more than welcome to join the open sessions in the real-time Slack channel. Download your project box, whatever you're working on, as long as it's Unreal Engine. Throw it in there. We'll take a look at it. A mentor will, and they can give you some real critique or help you figure out some issues. Yeah. So I hope this helps. Again, welcome to the journey. I'm happy you're with me. I'm excited to be learning alongside y'all too. Good luck out there.